I'm Connor Boyack, and this is 6 ways that schools torture kids. Number 1, suppression of curiosity. Children are naturally born with a lot of curiosity. They want to know about the world they're growing up a part of. They ask why all the time, as any parent knows. And this is important because they're exploring the world around them. But modern schools are designed to suppress curiosity. Kids who raise their hand to ask a question and ask why, and why do I need to know this, and why is it important, are told to put their hand down and learn it because it's going to be on the test. Children learn over time to suppress their own curiosity. They learn to stop asking questions because schools are designed to train conformity. They're encouraging children to stop asking questions and simply follow orders. This, of course, is really unhealthy because children need to ask questions to learn. They should discover the world around them based on their diverse interests and curiosity. But when teachers force kids to ask questions, it's naturally suppressing their curiosity and teaching kids that they should simply learn what they are told to learn, how they're told to learn it, at the time that they're told to learn it. This, of course, is really unhealthy for our society more broadly because we want independent-minded, critical thinkers in our society, not a bunch of mindless lemmings who do what they're told. Number 2, permission to pee. Schools are built on a very authoritarian model. Of course, students have to get permission to do a whole host of activities, including going to the bathroom. And what this is teaching kids in school is that they have to submit to authority, that there are authority figures that have to be obeyed unquestioningly, even if the child has specific biological needs, even if they have intellectual curiosities that diverge from what the teacher has planned for them to learn or to do that day. Of course, in the aggregate, what this is teaching kids as they grow up and become teenagers and adults is to follow the leader, whoever that leader may be. It's disincentivizing their desire and preventing their practice in following their own voice, in doing what they want to do or need to do in the moment that they need to do it. And in the aggregate, then, that creates a society of people who are willing to submit to all kinds of authoritarianism. I think COVID, most recently, certainly shows us the dangers of conformity with an entire generation of people who were raised on raising their hand to get permission even to go to the bathroom. Number 3, periods over prolonged exploration. Now, I can't tell you how many times when I was growing up, I was curious to learn something I actually found interesting that was going on in class. It was rare, but it happened. And the problem was that the bell would ring and we would have to move on to entirely different subjects and stop learning whatever it is that we were curious about. So rather than prolonged exploration of an idea, rather than engaging deeply and immersively in whatever topic was of interest to me or to you at the time, the bell rang and we had to go to our next class. This regimentation of education, compartmentalizing it into tiny little increments, is very confusing for young minds. It really prevents them from going deep into specific topics. And you might say, well, they can do that at home, but not if they're given hours of homework and projects and they're mentally tired from a long day of this disjointed structure, forcing them to jump from one subject to the next. Number 4, you're on your own. So the problem here is that schools torture kids by making them learn everything on their own under this false idea that when they become adults, they're going to have to figure things out on their own as well. Of course, this is not the way it works at all. Human relationships, having coworkers at work, using the internet, all these things are predicated on sharing of information and resources. Very, very, very rarely do we as adults have to figure out something entirely on our own. And yet schools torture kids by making them recreate the whole process, do the whole formula, do all the research entirely independently, all on their own without peer support. And this is fake, it's artificial, it's simply wrong because it's educating kids based on a model that they will not be utilizing when they're adults. When instead, we should be teaching kids based on the way that we as adults and frankly all humans learn, and that is socially and cooperatively. So it's torture for these kids to have to learn things on their own without the support of others. Number 5, just in case learning. If you or I as adults need to figure something out, let's say the refrigerator breaks down, or we have to figure out how to make a certain meal or balance a checkbook. Do people still do that anymore? I don't know. What we do is what's called just-in-time learning. I'll use this video as an example. I had to figure out how to use some of the devices here, and so just in time for that, I was Googling and trying to figure out what to do, and then I figured it out. I got the information I needed, and here we are recording this video. Schools, however, torture kids by preventing them from pursuing just-in-time learning. Instead, what schools use is called just-in-case face learning. And so they cram kids' minds full of facts, forcing them to memorize all kinds of things just in case they ever need to know that information when they're older. And so curious kids, frustrated kids, kids like young Connor raise their hand and say, why do I need to know this stuff? When am I ever going to need to know that the mitochondria is the powerhouse of the cell? To which teachers would typically respond, put your hand down. You may need to know this someday. It's important to learn. It's going to be on the test. And so this is torture for kids because you're forcing them to learn all kinds of irrelevant, useless information that they're never going to use in their life, rather than teaching them how to think, how to find the information that they need, so that in the future, when they're adults, just in time for when they need it, they'll have access to that information because they know how to find it. So it's torture for kids to cram their minds full of all of these useless things that lack context and relevance for their young lives. Number 6, lowest common denominator. Finally, one of the ways that schools torture kids is by teaching to the average, or teaching to the lowest common denominator. So the problem here is that if you are a gifted kid who can learn far faster than other kids in your class, or if you excel naturally in a particular topic, you are held back and prevented from progressing in many instances because the teacher has to slow down and make sure that other people can catch up. The problem here is that you are effectively chaining kids to their peers who may not be as good at them in something, rather than celebrating their success, rather than unleashing their potential and having an environment in which those kids can accelerate, can go deep, can pursue their interests rather than being held back by others. So if you're a gifted kid, this can really feel like torture, because anyone who's gifted wants to develop those gifts, wants to be able to share them with others, wants to go explore the potential of, the boundaries of what they know and what they can do and what comes naturally to them. And when they are held back, when they're effectively chained to other kids who are not as gifted as they are, that can really feel like torture. It's unfair to those kids to have a model that puts them all in the classroom, not based on intelligence or ability or interests and curiosities, but based on the same age when they were born. It's completely ridiculous, and it's torture for all the gifted kids out there. Of course, there are many other ways that schools torture kids as well. These modern institutions are built in a very specific way that creates a lot of problem and harm for other kids. This is why homeschooling is on the rise, basically tripled across the country, because so many families are recognizing that what they thought was helping their students is actually in many ways harming them. They've assumed the best for a long time and delegated to these institutions the education of their children during their most formative years, trusting to these teachers that they're going to do a great job. And there's so many amazing teachers out there trying within the confines of this arbitrary, ineffective, anti-human system to do the best to help kids, but it's not enough. And it leaves a bunch of children behind, notwithstanding the so-called No Child Left Behind attempts by Congress in recent years. So if you can homeschool your kids, awesome. But there are so many parents who send their kids to public, private, or charter school. And those parents need to recognize, as John Taylor Gatto talks about in his book, Dumbing Us Down, The Hidden Curriculum of Compulsory Education, that this system is designed to do a disservice to our kids. It's designed for other purposes, not for supporting the intellectual curiosity of independent-minded critical thinkers. And so if that's what you want, if that's what your goal is, it's my goal for my kids, then you have to take action. And maybe that means homeschooling, but even if you're going to keep your kids in school, you have to create an environment at home that honors their curiosity, that de-emphasizes the authoritarianism in education, that allows them to understand that learning is a very collaborative experience and that they can cobble together resources from a variety of places and people rather than doing it on their own. We need to allow our gifted kids to thrive and go deep and not be so regimented every 45 minutes ringing a bell or things like that. We have to be intentional. We have to do our part because the schools are creating a lot of harm. Thanks for watching, everyone. If you'd like to get more videos on education, parenting, and how to talk to your kids about the ideas of a free society, make sure to subscribe.